trying to get a sale in an email, especially a cold email, is damn near impossible.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com. Today, interview.
Hey, Jack, just before we start, I've been doing some thinking lately. You know, our podcast won't be legit until we have a sponsor, right?
Okay, but haven't we been turning down sponsors?
I know, but it's hard to recommend something you and I don't use often, and we're already promoting the crap out of our services.
Fair point, but what about the course we just released? Wouldn't you recommend that to our listeners?
Yeah, for sure I would. All right, so how would we start?
Well, for starters, I wouldn't mention that it took us over a year and 3 trips to Japan and Switzerland to record the thing.
All right, let's not do that. But at minimum, I would want to mention where they can find the course. Like, let's put it to, I don't know, course.quickmail.io. Would that work for you?
It works. And then I could share what a few of those early students had to say about it. Like the one from Damien, who said it was by far the best course on cold outbound I've ever taken. Or what did Chris say? The week on sales research and targeting prospects blew my mind. Yeah, we definitely want that in there.
Yeah, I like it. It's kind of too easy. You know, people always say nice things when they get results. And at some point, we're going to have to come up with some hard sell copywriting materials of our own. And you know, I'm not that great at that. So I don't know, what would you put on a page?
Okay, how about this? Imagine that instead of getting ignored by prospects day after day, you could just follow a course that shows you how to book meetings with dream clients and automate the entire outbound process so you can focus on closing deals and scaling your company. Plus, there's that money-back guarantee and the 8 modules and the bonus podcast interviews. But so far, so good?
Yeah, I like it, man. But you know, I like your style. So anyway, all right, it's getting a bit late. So can we podcast now and review that later?
Yeah, but at least promise me that course.quickmail.io is finally live and people can finally try out the course right now.
Yeah, sure. I already put it live, and just so you know, I added that special price we discussed about for our podcast listener, and then we can leave it here until, you know, we're happy with the landing page. Sounds fair enough?
Yeah, let's do it. We're joined here with none other than John Carlton. I think it's safe to say it's Jeremy and I's, let's say, copywriting guru that we've been stealing and swiping copy from since the very beginning here. So John, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So I got to kick things off with how I came across John Carlton. This was way early on in my copywriting career as a freelancer. And though I'm doing cold email now, I started off just doing any copywriting gig I could get my hands on. I think my first paid copywriting gig was a Craigslist ad for some landscaping company. And I only landed it because I'd worked in landscaping and tree trimming before. So really humble beginnings, but I landed a few clients, got some, momentum. And I started to be this young, cocky copywriter until I had this client interview me. He said, okay, so let me see your work. All right, checks out. So who are your go-to copywriters? Who do you study? Who are the legends? And I rattled off a couple of the classics that, John, you're obviously well familiar with. But then he goes, okay, cool. And John Carlton? And I was like, I'm sorry, who? He goes, John Carlton. You know John, right? And I said, gosh, no, I don't. He goes, all right, this interview's over. I'm not working with a writer who doesn't know John.
This was in Florida?
No, it was this was before Upwork was Upwork. It was like, the old school online freelance days. And yeah, just a guy who was like, yep, that's a disqualifier right there. You got to know John. So
wow.
After that, I studied up, man. So thanks.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And for me, I was like copying by hand all your copywriting at 4:00 in the morning, just before spending like 2 hours on my side business before then going to spend, the rest of the day working on my day job. So yeah, I wrote quite long letters.
You had a real job and a side job, and you were studying copywriting?
Absolutely, sir. I was like spending half an hour every morning at 4:00 in the morning, just writing down your sales letters and enjoying that. I mean,
congrats, guys. I hope it's done well for you.
Yeah, it has. It's given us a good career. Would you say, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm loving it. Yeah.
Okay, but here's our angle. So, John, people who are, let's say, less familiar with you know that they can go to john-carlton.com and get literally months of reading material in your archives. And thank God that you've got a lot of podcast interviews logged already. There's some good stuff that you've penned on the internet. And so what we're hoping to do is have a bit of a deeper discussion on where this fits in with cold email. And of course, getting your take on copywriting in general, research, figuring out how to get prospects to buy what you're selling. So with that, what's your first impression with cold email? Do you hate them? Do you get them every freaking day and you wish they didn't exist, or what?
Well, you mean as a consumer, I'm generally not happy with cold email. I'm not sure if this happens with everyone or not, but I have a certain number of people that I exchange email with, and we have relationships that are going on, and cold email will stand out like a sore thumb. So it's really tough for the person behind the cold email to get in there. And that's why you have to treat the subject lines like not just a headline, but as personal as you can get. And I don't know what you guys teach specifically about this, but whenever I counsel people, if I'm doing, say, a consultation and they're trying to get into cold lists, one of the things I like to do is, of course, the list is the most important thing when you're doing any kind of marketing at all. And if you can get an endorsement from somebody, that can pave the way for you to get your foot in the door. So it's not just, hi, are you interested in, pet supplies, cheaper than you can get at Petco? It would be, hey, James Schramko mentioned you in an email yesterday, ... something like that. Something that will go, yeah. Oh, I know James, and I don't know now, and I'll get in there.
Yeah.
So you go for familiarity. The way to make email work is to establish a relationship, have credibility, and you have to give them a reason to read. That's my dog going nuts. You have to give them a reason to read further. And it's a step-by-step process. When you have a relationship, I send email out to my list twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. And I have clients that I've counseled to be sending 2 or 3 times a day. So there's a sliding scale there. And each email has to stand on its own. There has to be a reason why that email is going to be an exciting event in the recipient's day. It has to be the most exciting thing that he's read if you're doing any kind of sales at all. So it's like dating. I've been using this analogy for decades. Cold email is like meeting somebody who doesn't know you at all. And, whatever kind of game you bring to the game is how far you're going to get. There has to be some interest. You have to immediately establish credibility. That's where things like, I don't know if you guys study the early days of the dating experts. I'm friends with Eben Pagan and those guys. It was just when they were talking about it, I just thought, wow, this is all marketing 101, what they're doing. You have a bird dog. You have somebody that establishes credibility for you, so you're not bragging. There's all these salesmanship things that come into play. The problem with email is you've got the subject line, and the from address should be something friendly. I don't know what you guys tell people to do, but get some kind of, a name in there or something. So it's not an immediate, trip to the junk file. So it's all about the subject line, and then bring them in. And then it's about the first line leading to the second line to third, and then hopefully you get on a roll and you get going. And then the ask is really important. What are you going to ask these people to do? Are you asking them to do something dramatic, like buy this stuff, or just hop over to get a free report at a website, or sign up for something? If you're asking for any kind of action, and especially if you're in B2B, and is that what you guys specialize in, is business to business? Then you're taking time out of usually a busy or a frantic or a desperate day. So you can't be casual. A lot of times when you're going to consumers, you can be a little casual about it because you can hit them multiple times. The business guy is going to be more harsh in all of his judgments. He's going to cancel you faster. He's going to react faster to something that's in his wheelhouse. So, it all depends on what's going on. So the endorsed mail or the endorsed email is, I don't know how you guys teach that tactic, but that you sometimes have to back up a step. If you're a rookie in business and you don't have a network, then you got to build your network. If you have the network, then you have to learn how to treat the people on your network to establish relationships with them so that you can mail to their list, and not just mail to the list, but get an endorsement from it. Like, guys, I want to introduce you to Jack and Jeremy, and you're going to get an email from them at 5:00 tomorrow morning. It's going to have the subject line, blah, blah, blah. You've got to read this, that type of stuff.
It's reminding me of how you and I and Jeremy became or sat down on this podcast together. John, you're not the first guest. And I imagine that if we tried to reach out when this podcast was brand new, probably wouldn't have worked, right? So there's maybe stepping stones that you, as let's say a business owner trying to grow sales, maybe there's accounts that you target and you use that to leverage new referrals and more social proof and credibility. And I don't know if you can speak to what copywriters can use in terms of credibility and building social proof in the business world.
Yeah. It's so important. And a lot of writers, a lot of entrepreneurs don't want to do that. So it's when you have to back up, when you got a few clients and you're just charging full steam ahead, you don't want to back up at all. But sometimes you have to. If you don't have a network, you have to establish a network.
Yeah.
And the network can start off with one or two people. It can be other writers. I have multiple networks. I have a writer network that is just a email group with a bunch of A-listers. And then I have my other various groups. I have connections with businesses and things like that. But I've been nurturing them for 40 years. When you're just starting out, you, as a writer, I assume this isn't relevant right now. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but right now we've got a virus pandemic going on, so people aren't going to gatherings. But there's a couple of events going on right now, and I think I haven't heard anything from the people I know that are going. But when it is viable, you should go to events, and you should go to events with the explicit self-direction of starting your network. If you come away with just one person from an event that you can then regularly email and they know who you are, you can back things up, that can blossom into a bigger one very quickly. And if you pick up 2 or 3 people, and I'm not talking about picking up business cards and sending them an email, I'm talking about finding somebody, knowing who they are, taking them out to lunch or buying them a drink, and just establishing a little bit of a relationship, and then saying, hey, would you mind if I emailed you or whatever? Again, like dating, like coming on. You can't come on too strong. You can't come on too light. You have to have some confidence, and you have to give them a reason to say yes. You can't say, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I would really love it if I could email you. That ain't going to cut it. You have to say, hey, I have something of value. I have my own network. I have a podcast, for example. I have reasons that it might benefit you down the road. And you don't line them out like in cold numbering thing, but you're actually speaking with them. You're talking with them. You're developing relationships. And one of the reasons people get into copywriting, of course, is that they're introverts. And they
interesting.
I was fired from almost every job I had before I discovered freelancing, and freelancing offered me a chance to not have a boss, to not have to deal with people, not have to get up, shower, get dressed, go into an office, all that stuff. And those were huge advantages for me because I'm a stone cold night owl introvert. I do my best work at night. So I had to establish a personality. I have multiple personalities. All good salespeople do. All good business owners do. There's a control room up there, and there's a lot of different characters vying for control of your brain. And your first job is to get rid of the scolding parent who is telling you you're no good and you should go get a job and stop this entrepreneurial nonsense. And then the nagging voice that still is making you embarrassed from the time you wet yourself in the 4th grade. All of those things, you have to usher them out and keep them out. And you have to understand who are the adults essentially in the room. And of those characters in your head, you have, even the most stone cold introverts have an extrovert in there. I mean, I've been speaking on stages for 30 years. And again, as an introvert, one-on-one, I can be kind of shy. It saps me of energy to be in a group of people. I really don't like it. But I'll stand up in front of 1,000 people and deliver a riveting speech and have a lot of fun doing it. So that's a roundabout way of getting back to the steps. It sounds like you have to keep stepping back, but you do. You have to keep stepping back from your ultimate goal, which is to be a recognized copywriter who can nail cold email in a deliberate, effective way and have people asking you to come and work for them rather than you going out and beating the brush to get clients. And so like any good marketing, it goes with a list. And for you, the list is your network.
Yeah.
So build up the network, find that internal extrovert you've got and test it out. Because a lot of introverts, when they first bring that extrovert out, it's a bumbling idiot. And you got to smooth it out. You got to. I talk about putting on different hats. I mean, have a uniform you wear if you go to an event or you're going to meet somebody. Dress better than casual. A collared shirt and a sport coat go a long way over even the dirtiest jeans and tennis shoes. You have to understand you're establishing your own identity out there, and you should really get something going. So all of this sounds like a lot of work. It's really not. It's something you can pull together overnight. But then go to events or stalk people. I've been stalked by more copywriters than I can count. Kevin Rogers, I'm sure you guys are aware of him. He's across the state from you, Jack, in St. Pete. And he stalked me for, almost a year, I guess.
So how did he break through?
Oh, it was ballsy. It's a worthwhile study. He and I did a podcast for several years called the
Psych Insights
for Modern Marketers, right? And I think one of the early ones, we talked about how he got into my circle. I was having a mastermind in Chicago, but he had established himself before that. This is 15 years ago. There was something called the Warrior Forum. Is that still out there?
Mm-hmm. I remember, yeah.
It is? I'm astonished. But I actually was bouncing around the Warrior Forum because it was new. There weren't a lot of forums for just copyright. And he established himself, again, going backwards, as a guy who started doing long comments on hot threads and being the voice of reason. And he would refer to me, too. So I'd get flagged. Somebody would say, well, where's Carlton? And I'd come in once a week or something. I'd go on. So I'm asking, who's this guy, Kevin? And there were actually a couple of threads where they say, let's see what Kevin has to say. Let's wait until Kevin pops in, because he was popping every day. And he was the voice of rationality and professionalism, even though his professional career wasn't that hot at the time. So it took him a while to establish that. He did that on purpose, but he didn't know he was following a time-tested, very old tactic that guys have used to enter into closed societies for a long time. Become a guy that becomes welcome in there. You can bust some balls, but you can't be a ball buster. You can be sarcastic, but you can't be sarcastic against specific people. You become the adult in the room again, too. You can keep using that phrase. So he got my notice there, and then he found a reason to email me privately, and I think we even got on the phone about something. And it was something that I got something out of. I can't remember what it was, but it was something that I didn't just say, hey, you sound like a cool guy, because I don't need any more friends, and most people in business don't need any more friends, but they do want more colleagues. So Kevin did that. He found out I was doing a mastermind in Chicago, and he said, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago. I said, drop in. You'll be quite welcome. And he came in, and, he did very well. And I took him aside at the first break and said, you're doing very well. I appreciate your input, because most guys come into masterminds, they sit there and they don't do anything. Kevin had a history of being on stage as a stand-up comic, which he was leaving, but he's also an introvert. He's a little flaky at times, but he kind of studied how consultations go between writers and clients and masterminds and things like that. So he came in and he participated, and that is a rare thing.
Yeah.
There are three kinds of people in a mastermind. There are the ones that just sit there until they're asked a question, and then often, they want to slither out of it. I do very small masterminds too, like 12 people. You can't hide. Then there are the ones who participate but talk nonsense or gibberish or try to lecture people. Then there are ones that totally know what's going on, and they are able to participate in a non-dysfunctional way that actually helps things, and I will even call them. Kevin, what do you think about that? What's your experience with that? He'll have something to say. He doesn't have to think about what he's going to say. He has experience. He did. He has enough gumption to be able to have an idea and present it in a way. And he's always looking for the different way of looking at a situation that the rest of the room maybe is not doing that. So he was very good at that. So he's a natural. In fact, he's part of my mastermind today, the mastermind that's been going on for 15 years now. So that's how he got into with me. And once he got in with me, of course, he jumped past that whole networking thing because he then we put him in charge of, we had a little copywriter stable back then and we were doing things, and he became a friend and a colleague and also a partner in some things. So
Yeah.
that was a way to jump, but it took him a couple of years probably to get. In the meantime, he was building his credibility. He was building his client list. And he was working with Vin Montello. I don't know if you know him. I think he's somewhere in the South, I believe. And a couple of other guys, and through them meeting other writers. But he concentrated on one guy, and he decided the guy he was going to concentrate was me. He was also following, I think, Jay Abraham. Gary Halbert was still around at the time. There were lots of writers out there and younger writers. And now he's good friends with James Schrackmo. Dean Jackson lives near him. They're good buddies. Last time he threw an event, I went down, I stayed with Dean for, I don't know, a few days. And then we went to the event. And at one time, Dean and James Schramko and I were in the same car driving up to the thing, and Kevin started freaking out because if we got in a wreck and died, there would his entire power structure for networking.
Yeah. No.
Okay, well, you guys haven't talked in a while, so you're probably thinking of other questions. So.
No, it's funny. At some point, you mentioned, the introvert type, working at night and being really good at copywriting. This is funny because it describes exactly the world I'm coming from, which is a developer world. And I can tell you...
The what world?
Developer. I've come from a developing background. So I was a developer before. And that's funny because there is zero skill of salesmanship in people like that. So that was kind of funny to hear the sort of like opposite take on this one. And it took me actually 8 months in order to shift my mind. Once I started, writing your letters by hand, took me roughly 8 months to really figure out that's benefits and things like that.
John, I got to pick your brain on a specific question I have, because as let's say a copywriting student of yours, I'm writing down your headlines. And if you're listening and you don't know about John Carlton's golf ad, stop what you're doing and Google it so you know what the hell I'm talking about. But that's a fantastic headline. And I mean that in both sense of the word.
Which one are you referring to?
Crippled golfer.
Oh, that one? Okay.
With one leg. Yeah. I mean, it's so attention grabbing. I mean, good luck reading it and not continuing into the ad. But that's the point. Now, through the lens of cold email, if I wrote you an email, John, you don't know me from Adam, and I'm having bullet points and I'm a little bit more salesy, more like, let's say, trying to be more of a copywriter than I should be, you'll put me in the trash. You'll spam my emails. So how do we find the balance between making sure we make our point very clearly and not coming off as yet another marketer?
Are we still talking B2B?
Yeah.
B2B only. Yeah.
Well, it all depends on the list. When I was writing those golf ads or the self-defense ads, that they were going to cold audiences because they first ran in magazine, which is essentially a cold targeted list. It's not going randomly out to people in the community. It's going to people who bought a golf magazine, who bought a self-defense magazine.
Right.
Even so, you have to back up again. What is keeping those guys up at night? Now we're talking about consumers there, but what is the real reason? And this is where psychology comes in. And this is why Kevin and I did that podcast, Psych Insights for Modern Marketers. I was doing a series of emails called Psych Insights. And he said, wow, we should just do a podcast on that. And it was great. But the whole idea is to have a psychological insight. Now, you have to extrapolate this from this for B2B. But in the golf world, for example, I went in there and I'm a duffer myself. I shoot around 100. I'm not great. So I realized and I suspected, and then we found out so that we knew that the average golfer who bought that magazine was not 28 years old in perfect health with a windmill swing and playing almost scratch golf. And that's what most of the ads in there were targeting. It was like the guy that I wanted to reach was the duffer who was overweight, who was older, who had arthritis, who couldn't break 100 to save his life. And what was that guy's needs? And we found out that we had a bunch of products and we did things, and we found out that putting, for example, was not a concern of his. He didn't care about putting. What he wanted, and he didn't really want to drop his score. He would maybe say he wanted to drop his score, but the stuff they bought were all about hitting monster tee shots. So we started concentrating on tee shots. And then,
sorry, John, how did you learn that?
Yeah. What was the research process?
Doing ads, failing ads. So
okay.
Having a network, that was when we were alone back then, when we decided to buck the establishment and have 3 pages of long copy with no photos first, then one photo later, just a photo of the guy about to swing, not an instructional photo at all. And the magazines even begged my clients not to run it. They were convinced it was going to fail. And by the 4th time they put it into the mag, they started realizing it was working. They started trying to bury it in the back of the magazines. And they got very upset because it was starting to affect the other advertisers. They were getting pissed off. They didn't want to be in a mag with this kind of trashy stuff going on.
I love it. I love the story.
But that was part of a process. Now, I knew golf a little bit, and I knew the guys I golfed with and I golfed a lot. My business partner, Stan, and I have done something called Golf Week every year for about, we're around 30 years now, I think. We just go somewhere and golf all week, tell the women where they can't contact us for a week. And while writing for these products, I started interviewing the talent. I started talking to other golfers with the express goal of finding out the psychology of the golfer we were after. So I learned it. The putting pieces I did were excellent, and they did sell, but they didn't sell like the other ones. So it affected my copy. I started talking about the golf salute. It's people on the tee box with you. When you hit one, they do this because they're watching the shot sail out. And it's like, that makes you all proud. And guys will lose every bet, when they're playing for money, as long as they're out driving everyone else. That's a particular slot for a copywriter and a salesman to get into in that particular market. Now bring it over to B2B. One of the things that I teach is that when you're in B2B, don't get caught up in the idea of business to business, because it's still human being to human being. And if you can find out what's keeping that CEO or CFO or whoever you're trying to reach, what's keeping him up at night. If you're going to regular entrepreneurs in a specific market, it's a lot easier. It's more targeted. Yeah. If you're going to a much broader thing, like people who belong to, Toastmasters or all the CEOs in the Cleveland, Ohio area,
yeah.
Right? That's much broader. The more experience you have in life and in business and in understanding people and their psychology, what makes them tick, what makes them worry, what freaks them out, what makes them happy, then you have unfair advantage in reaching them. So when you're going with cold email, being topical can really help, especially with businesses, especially right now. The stock market is tanking. All kinds of things are going on. Now, if you look at regular B2B email, it'll be very cold and imprecise, and they don't want to step on any toes.
Right.
So if you're going to a cold list, I don't know what you guys teach, but in the old days, a cold list, a 2% response from a cold list could be a success as long as you were priced right, and you could roll that out after you tested. If you got a 2 to 5%, you could roll that out. When you're emailing, I don't know if you're paying for lists or if you're making your own lists or wherever you're doing this, you have to decide what a profitable response is. But then the big realization a lot of people don't realize is that if you're getting 5%, which is a monster win, 95% of the people are not responding. So if you're dancing around trying not to offend the 90% that aren't going to respond, and 80 to 90% will never respond no matter what you do. You're dealing with that 10% range that is persuadable, or, they're kind of like swing voters, I guess. So there's the buyers, and then there's the guys on the edge, and there are guys that could be persuaded, but it's a small number. Yeah. And so once you know that, it's balls to the wall. It's like, what is keeping them up? And I address that, and don't pussyfoot around it. Don't tiptoe around the elephant in the room.
Yeah. So to crystallize that for our listeners, go straight to the pain points, the fact of their business that's causing them to lose sleep. However, unlike, let's say, traditional direct response, we don't have the luxury of long copy. We don't have the luxury of using power words, for example. So we may still be able to go.
Why not?
Some spam filter are probably going to be triggering. It depends on which one, but some power words been overused.
True. You have to understand how spam filters work. Yes, you're absolutely right. You can't use free, or I don't know if you can use it now.
Yes.
I mean, guaranteed is going to put you in a spam filter. I mean,
yes. And the word business.
Yeah.
That's why I use BIZ for biz. So yeah, you have, it's true. But that doesn't, when you say power words to me is, I put together a report called Power Words. I took out all the verbs. So they're not adjectives, they're verbs. So it's a way to spice up your writing. So
and for a listener, the power words is whatever is associated with an emotion to it, right?
Yeah, but it's like most people will say, you've got to read this. I would say, read this or die.
Yeah.
Something like that. That's not going to put you in a spam filter. So the list of words that are going to get you in a spam filter are mostly the common words from spam email, free, guaranteed, money back, things like that. But those aren't power words to begin with.
Okay.
So power words would be like, let's say you go into your next business meeting. And I would go, let's say you waltz into your next business meeting with a shit-eating grin. So that's a better use of a verb right there. Instead of go, it's waltz.
Sure.
Things like that. So that's just to clarify my take on power words. So you can use that. And that's one of the ways to separate yourself from the also-rans in your subject line. If you have an exciting subject line, now you're limited by how many words. It's like the old AdWords days. You only have a certain number of characters really until it drops off.
Mm-hmm. The copywriter's haiku.
Yeah. So a lot of times what I do, especially, I'm trying to think of how I did this with business, but I would do brackets first, and I'd have something inside the bracket that was like a identifying word that identified, let's say I'm going to dog groomers, it'd be Dog Groomers Association or something like that. I'd put that, or attention dog groomers, and then the headline. So
I like that.
Kind of like what would in a direct mail letter would be the superscript, the little thing above, or teaser copy, for example, something like that. So yeah, you got to learn to play the game. One of the worst things that happened in online marketing was AdWords, in that, now called Google Ads, but it was, you only had a certain number of characters you could have for each of these spaces in the AdWords. The good thing about it was it forced writers to be economical and still powerful in how they wrote. So there was a very big benefit there. So that when email became a viable marketing vehicle, you use that in, you use what you learned doing AdWords in subject lines.
In your view, John, what do you see as a massive difference between someone trying to learn the skill of doing a long sales letter, in an ad, in a magazine, for example, versus someone throwing a cold email and trying to get, open a dialogue with someone? What are the major difference that you're seeing?
Well, you guys know the launch formula, right?
Jeff Walker
and his launch formula.
But it'd be good for our listener, maybe, if we can just quickly summarize that.
I'm going to explain the essence of it. What Jeff did was take a sales, he said he took a sales letter, but what he really did was took a whole sales process and tipped it over, so that rather than one thing happened, it would be a drip of information. And so that's why launches take a couple of weeks, or, at a minimum 5 days or so, I think. Mm-hmm. And you would start getting really hard-hitting stuff, leading you to things building up, and then you get to the sales thing. So the reason I bring that up is because especially in cold email, trying to get a sale in an email, especially a cold email, is damn near impossible.
That's right.
So what you have to take the process, establish connection, establish credibility, excite interest, build desire, the old AIDA thing, start establishing trust, start doing that, and tip it sideways. And the first emails have to cover a lot of relationship ground to establish you as somebody worthwhile, to get them kind of excited about the next email coming down the pike. Essentially being like a dope dealer. The first one's free, bring them in, and then, reach whatever point. So it's all in the ask. What are you going to ask them to do? What kind of action? If you're doing direct response, there's always some kind of action. first action can always be tomorrow at 5 a.m. I'm sending out an email about blah, the stock market, dog grooming, whatever market you're in, or whatever broad market slice you're in. So you don't need to keep sending people to websites. You can get them excited about the story that's going. I'll continue the story tomorrow at 5 a.m. or 7 a.m. or whatever.
How does that work with, imagine I'm contacting like a certain type, let's say CA4.
Say product managers.
Yeah,
maybe.
product managers, for example. You actually don't really have a CTA on your first call to action on your first email. Do you actually just say like, hey, I'm going to send you another email at that time? Do you actually not try to get any response from the first email? How does that work for you?
What kind of product managers?
Oh, I mean, pick one. It doesn't really matter to me.
It does matter. It matters a lot because you want to find out what makes them tick. The tech product managers are a lot different than the dog food product managers.
Let's say tech because it'll be closer to my world.
Okay.
So I understand better the analogy.
And John, just so you know, our goal with cold email is just to open a dialogue. That is our response that we're asking our recipient.
But I like how you push back on actually, just you have to be specific as to who you're really going after.
Yeah. And if you're a writer and you don't know, say you're not a tech person, you don't know anybody in tech, you need to go find somebody in tech and talk to them. And you need to talk to more than one because they may give you some information or insight that is incorrect or is skewed or biased. So try to interview 3 to 5 people, try to get some kind of broad input. And, calling people up cold saying, hi, my name is Bob Smith. I'm doing some marketing for a product. I'd really like to get your input on what product managers in tech are freaked out about and stuff. And these people will talk because nobody ever asks them what they think. Their wives don't want to hear their stories. Their kids think their job is boring. The only time they get to talk is when they're hanging around other product managers. Or, good God, a writer has come into their lives and wants to get some stuff. And, promise them, say, I'm not going to use your name. I'm not a journalist. We're not trying to do anything. I want to get inside the head of the product managers because blank. And if you don't know anything about tech, then before you do that, I'd see what's written. I'd go and see if there's any blogs on the industry, any books written, and get steeped in the culture, the buzzwords, and you should be able to handle 50% of the buzzwords. And if the guy starts talking about something like using abbreviations and you don't know what they're talking about, stop them. Say, I'm sorry. I know about, electronic transfer, between, Cobalt Industries, but I don't know what that word means. And they'll be glad to explain it to you. Okay. And one of your jobs too is even when you're dealing with product managers within an industry or somebody tight within an industry, you don't use those buzzwords. Or if you do, you say in parentheses, in plain English, that means blah. Nobody thinks you're an idiot for explaining a term that he knows very, very well, but they will be lost if you start using terms that they don't know and they'll feel like this is over their head or they're not ready for this particular part. So getting into the head of the person you're writing to is paramount. You can't, no matter how good a writer you are, you can't just sit down and figure it out. There are no magic words, no magic headlines that will reach all human beings when they're in a specific market with specific needs. And different things are keeping them up at night.
So, John, would you recommend this to, let's say, the business owner who's looking to crack a particular market and maybe they've been around it, but before they launch a campaign?
They're the worst. The guys who have been in the market for a long time think they know everything. They're the ones who are behind the curve.
That's right.
They've stopped staying current. Their staff is hiding stuff from them because they'll walk into the boiler room and say something about the script that is nonsense and hasn't been proven at all.
Yeah.
They are generally removed from the action. If you can find a business owner who is still in the action, that would be in the first couple of years of business, then that can be good. They might be cutting edge. They may be the guys that are actually creating the models that other people are following. That's a big find.
And of course, the reason we're doing this, picking up the phone, getting to step inside the mind of the prospect is to speed up learning, right? Basically. Okay.
Yeah, a good writer is like part journalist, part investigative journalist, part salesman, and, part con man. All of the top writers read books about con men, not because they want to con anybody, but because the con men know how to persuade. They have a brief shot at persuading someone into a con, then they got to leave town. So they're gonna use the fastest way to gain trust and do all this stuff. And those tactics are not evil. Those tactics are neutral. So if you know the tactics used by the con man, you can use them for ethical products. That's why at the beginning of my book, Kick-Ass Copywriting Secrets of a Marketing Rebel, I have a little thing in the front. I say, if you use any of the stuff you learn here for evil, I hope you rot in hell. And I actually threaten people. And I have not, sold the book to certain people because I thought they were unethical. So I've led an ethical life all the way through my career.
Yep.
I like dealing with ethical people. I don't like dealing with con. I learned to spot the sociopaths and the con men very, very early in my career, and I tried to teach other people how to do it. Yeah. But their tactics are still golden. It has nothing to do with the tactics.
So I have to say, you were one of the first people that told me about John D. McDonald's Travis McGee series, one of my favorite books of all time. And
especially down there by Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, you got to, man. So I have to ask, though, when I pick up the phone and I'm calling my product manager, I'm calling my CTO, have any go-to questions that when you really get down to it, this is what you ask when you got to know what's keeping them up at night?
Ask them what's keeping them up at night. Right now, I'm reading Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 1972. It's about the Nixon-McGovern primaries. And actually, it's concurrent with the current primary situation going here. As I'm reading the chapters, they just passed what became Super Tuesday. And he's an investigative journalist, and he's a ballsy kind of guy. He did something called gonzo journalism. He just comes out. It's the old who, what, why, where, when, and how of journalism taken to a personal level. So what he would do, and of course you can't do this by picking up the phone, but Hunter Thompson would go drink with these guys, get them a little drunk, get in, become friends, share experiences, and then ask them the bomber question, kind of drop the hammer at a certain time. When you're on the phone, you have to know how to, I would expect to bungle it for, the first few times. You may be nervous. You may have a list of questions. He may say, if he finds out you have a list of questions, for example, he may balk in answering something. He may say, I got to get back to it. And you may lose him. And that's fine because then you don't do that. But if you start out, you're saying, I'm working in marketing. I'm working with some clients, not direct competitors of yours, but, I'm interested in, nobody seems to be interested. This is it. Nobody seems to be interested in what product managers think about X. Either the market, the whatever. So I got the numbers of a couple of guys that came highly recommended. I can't tell you who recommended you. Yeah. They've asked to be quiet, but your name came up. I called you. And again, I'm not going to use your name in anything. This is merely, I'm investigating what product managers think about this stuff. So tell me, Bob, what's keeping you up at night about X?
Well said, John. I can tell you've done this before. Yeah, one of the things I'm learning is there isn't a soul on this planet that doesn't enjoy talking about themselves. So the closer we can enter the conversation talking about them, the easier it is to start this conversation.
Here's another tip. The product manager may actually be listened to by other product managers that he knows. Maybe he knows ones outside of his business. Maybe they're all in his department. It doesn't matter. When he says, oh, yeah, that's a hot topic, but we don't talk about that. We're bored with that. That's often a hook right there. If you say, wait a minute, so stop, hold back. That's where I got my one-legged golfer ad info from the guy. He didn't want to tell the story, and I forced him to do it because nobody wanted to hear the story again. Everybody was bored with that story. So it was like pre-formatted myth. It's like he took it for granted, and he thought
the one-legged golfer story was.
I grilled the guy on the phone for an hour. I was looking for a hook. I wasn't finding one. I was thinking this thing's going to bomb. And I finally said, how did you come up with the idea for this triple coil swing? He says, it's a boring story. I was watching this one-legged golfer, but nobody wants to hear that shit. I said, whoa, wait a minute. And then I made him tell me the whole story. And so
old news,
when you find something when you're interviewing that they don't want to talk about, or they think is boring, or the key is nobody wants to hear that. They're talking about their product manager friends. They're talking about a very closed society that is sharing a lot of information. And if you're going to the outside of that, or you're going outside, or let's say you're interviewing the product manager to be able to go to other product managers. Wow, this is inside stuff, because now you can casually drop bombs about this thing that he doesn't want to talk about.
Yeah.
And you'll do it knowledgeably. You won't do it from the outside. You can do it from an insider stance. If you're going to outside of the product manager thing, then you can deliver the story that these guys are bored of. There's a reason they're bored of it. It's because they talked about it for all of last year.
So, John, help me out, because I'm afraid some of our listeners are saying, oh, so I got to call people. I wish there was a short, either, smack me with some, honest feedback, or if there's a shortcut, please share.
Do you want to be a top copywriter or not? I mean, you can, in a pinch, if you can get a hold of insider publications. Is there a product manager monthly magazine?
Mm-hmm.
Find out if they have events. A
LinkedIn group, maybe.
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure. If they have events in Vegas, maybe you don't want to go to the events, but that's, I was doing a thing on dentists. I went there. I didn't talk to a single dentist, but boy, did I find out a lot about reaching dentists at this thing. You'd think it'd be a boring convention in Vegas. It wasn't. They dentists are the wild men. They all come the second day with vomit on their shoes because they partied so hard the night before. So yeah, you can do it through the written word. And if you can find some blogs, and you might luck out, and there might be a guy out there who's an ex-product manager of, say, Google, and he's doing a blog trashing Google, then you want to devour that stuff.
That's a good one.
Because you can be sure the product managers are reading it. So you want to find the contrary stuff. When you're an investigative reporter, you always want to find the contrary stuff, because one of the best positions to be in when marketing is contrary to what everybody else is saying. So you're not a me too. You're coming out with news, or you're coming out with a different perspective. And it's not just straight conspiracy stuff. You can't just, although I've written ads that essentially say everything you know about X is wrong.
And it works.
Well, it can in particular markets when everybody is wrong, when there's a suspicion that this may not be the best way to go. So.
Is there a point, John, where it's too much selling in an email? And how do you actually find out that this point?
Yeah, always.
Before you hopefully send the emails.
Okay, this is where you're getting into the area that's hard to teach. It's a feel. It's a sense of proportionality between salesmanship and relationship building. I certainly have tried to teach it in the simple writing system because I have a long section just on salesmanship in there. But you've got to, if you've never interviewed somebody, you've never written, asking somebody to take an action, you got to do that. That's your first job. You got to spend some months to a year having your fingers burned, your face slapped, and things go wrong, because you can't learn that from a book. You have to know what your particular sense of feel is regarding all of these things.
Do you ever share your copy before, publishing it with a group to get feedback from people you respect, John?
When Gary Halbert was alive, we would trade copy. And I have a group of writers that I regularly am in contact with through an email group. And I will occasionally float something, but I almost never take their advice.
Mm.
So, but I do want to get the feedback. So, no, going to another writer is sketchy because they're not your target audience. Gary Halbert famously used to take his pieces down to a bar in Santa Monica, and he would give it to some of the barflies, or he'd read it to them. The answer he was looking for was, holy shit, how do I get that? Can I get that before you mail it out? The answer he didn't want was, wow, that's really good. That's a nice piece of writing. That was a bomb. And he and I, I ghost wrote for Gary. We wrote together and did stuff for years. And we actually had another copywriter we knew, who will remain nameless, who we would show our copy to. And if she liked it, we knew it was going to bomb. And if she begged us not to run it, we knew we had a hit.
Nice.
So that's part of the thing when you're writing at the upper levels. I never want my clients to be happy about the copy. I want them losing sleep at night, before the copy goes out. I want them saying, I can't mail this. And I make them promise before that they will mail what I write. Mail, email,
Sure.
run
Send.
it on, send, put it up as a video on social media, whatever. That they will do it as I wrote it. And if they don't like it, they can test against it, but they can't change it.
Love it.
There's no teeth in those kind of contracts. Most of my clients, we work on a handshake basis anyway, but I make them promise that.
Yeah.
And the reason is if they show it to their wife's going to be pissed off about it and they won't let them run it. They'll change some of the wording. They'll say, you can't do this, because they're worried about what the 90% who won't buy thing.
Yeah.
And so you have to be hard-nosed about this and think about the 2 to 10% that will buy and what they need to hear, what they're pissed off about, what's keeping them up at night.
Well said. Hey, we're coming up to time, but before you go, share a couple books with our listeners. What are you reading? What do you recommend these eager copywriters get their hands on to be better marketers?
Well, go to my page. There's 3 books now on my Amazon page, just John Carlton Copywriting or Copywriter. That's the Entrepreneur's Guide to Getting Your Shit Together, volumes 1 and 2. And then a 3rd book, what is it? Success Secrets No One Told You About. Entrepreneur's Guide books are the best newsletters. I had a new Marketing Rebel newsletter that I wrote from 2002 until, I don't know, I wrote almost 10 years. And I took the best issues of those and added some other things and smoothed them out. So it's the best. And that newsletter only went to the inside crowd, to the movers and shakers and the A-listers. People cried when I stopped doing it. So go to the Amazon page, hop over to my blog, john-carlton.com.
Yep.
JohnCarlton.com is owned by a woodworker in Boston. He got there minutes before I did to grab the name. John-Carlton.com. It's my blog. It has 15 years of archives in there and access to a lot of my stuff. Kick-Ass Copywriting Secrets of Marketing Rebel can be gotten there. The Simple Writing System, things like that. What I'm reading right now is the Hunter Thompson book. I have a stack of books that I'll get into. Can't really say there's a lot of business books that I would recommend. People send me stuff before they publish it, and I'll read some manuscripts and things like that. But there's a lot of good copywriters out there writing stuff. For the women in your group, I don't know how many you have, but the Titanides, Marcella Anderson or Marcella Ellison, the Titanides group, I sent an email or a Facebook post out about it. That's a group of women helping women, especially copywriters. I highly recommend that for women because they often get a raw deal in the patriarchy that is the business world. Yeah, I'm not reading a lot of business, but I've read business books for 40 years and written them for 20. So I don't see a lot of new stuff. I will say for anybody reading a bunch of books, grab a stack of them and give yourself permission to stop reading anytime you get bored and read with purpose. Read through the foreword, read through the table of contents, get familiar with that, flip around, look at photos if you want first, look at all the photos and read the captions and see how the book is organized, and then read whatever chapter you want. And you don't need to go in order. You don't start at the beginning of a book. You treat a book like a tool. And if at any time it bores you, it becomes irrelevant, or you think the guy's full of shit, you have my permission to toss it. You just bounce it off the 2 walls and into the trash can, or recycle it, send it to Goodwill. That will speed things up. I can't tell you how many writers and entrepreneurs get stuck on a book and they can't open another one until they finish that because that's what they were taught in school, is to finish everything. It's bullshit. Don't do that. These are tools. Rip them up, write in them. They should be dog-eared. And if you want to keep a pristine copy that got signed, then buy another one to work with.
Great advice. Hey, that was awesome.
Hey, John, it was our treat to have you on the show, man. Thanks for dropping some copywriting wisdom bombs to us and our listeners, man.
It was fun. I don't get to do a lot of B2B stuff, so it was a little stretch for me to stay focused on that. So I hope people got something out of this.
John, you're welcome anytime, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, and before you go, John, I'll share one last thing. At some point, you had mentioned that where you're at in your career now as a copywriter, you wanted to make sure that all the other people coming up through the ranks didn't have to start with nothing, like you did. And you've given us a huge resource to hone our chops, or at least pick up some stuff much quicker than we would have learned any other way. So thanks for all the content.
That's my goal.
Yeah, man, really, it worked. So very appreciative of everything you shared. Yeah.
Okay, congrats, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks, John. Bye.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher, or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
So they can send awesome emails.
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.